Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about humble speech. Humble speech is something you might already be familiar with, but we're going to review it in this lesson. First, humble speech is known as 낮춤말, so humble speech. Both honorific speech and humble speech show extra respect to someone else who you're talking about. But the way that they do this is different. Honorific speech shows extra respect by elevating the other person. You can think of using honorific speech as if you're raising the person above you on a pedestal. While humble speech shows extra respect by lowering the speaker. You can think of using humble speech as if the speaker is lowering, meaning humbling themselves down in front of the person. So because of that, honorific speech and humble speech are often used together. And there are only two main verbs that you need to learn in order to use humble speech, and those are Turida and preda. So first, let's talk about Turida. Turida is the humble version of the verb 주다 and means to give. Here are some examples. 제가 이걸 드리고 싶었어요. I wanted to give this to you. 이건 선생님께 드릴 편지예요. This is a letter I'll give to the teacher. 할머니께 안 드렸어요? You didn't give it to your grandmother? 제가 어제 전해드렸습니다. I let them know yesterday. Let's talk about two verbs that are sometimes confused, and that is turida and jushida. Now, turida uses humble speech while jushida uses honorific speech. Although you can turida something to someone else, you would not jushida something in the same way. So you can humbly give something to someone else with turida, but someone else could give something using jushida. Here are some examples. 제가 선물을 드렸어요. I gave a present. 할머니가 선물을 주셨어요. Grandmother gave a present. Now, it would be incorrect to use turida for someone else who you want to show respect toward, because that would be making them lower themselves, so humbling themselves. However, in some cases, this is acceptable. For example, a parent may tell their child to give something to someone higher, someone to show extra respect toward, using the verb turida. Here's an example of that. 그거 내일 선생님께 드려. Give that to the teacher tomorrow. If it helps, you can picture turida as a person kneeling down and offering up something to someone with both hands. So be careful not to use this when someone's giving you something. The next humble verb we need to talk about is the verb preda, which is the humble version of the verb 보다 and means to see. Now this verb conjugates as 배워 or 배워요 in the 요 form. Here are some examples. 내일 봬요. See you tomorrow. 아침에 뵈도 될까요? Could I see you in the morning? 언제 뵐 수 있을까요? When could I see you? 다음 주 모임에서 뵐게요. I'll see you at the meeting next week. Again, while you can humbly see something using preda, only someone else would see something using 보시다. This works in the same way as turida and jushida. One more humble verb you should be aware of is 뵙다, which actually has the same meaning as preda, but is even more humble sounding. Note that this verb, 뵙다, is less common than preda. When conjugating the 요 form, 뵙다 also becomes 봬요 or 배워요. So the conjugation doesn't change. Here are some examples. 내일 선생님을 뵙고 싶어요. I want to see the teacher tomorrow. 만나 뵙게 되어 반갑습니다. It is nice to be able to meet you. 처음 뵙겠습니다. Nice to meet you. Note that this expression, 처음 뵙겠습니다, is an older expression, and nowadays it's more common to use 만나서 반갑습니다 or just 반갑습니다. But we're not done talking about these verbs. I should add that it would actually seem a bit too casual, not polite enough to use the verb 보다 to say 내일 봐요, see you tomorrow, or even 내일 보겠습니다 to someone that you would normally speak honorifically toward, such as your boss or a teacher. So if you mean that you're going to see someone like that, instead use the verb preda. In addition, it would sound a bit too casual just to say 제가 물을 줄게요. I'll give you some water to your boss or someone's grandparents, etc. So instead, use the verb turida. Using humble speech gives your speech the feel of I am talking upward to this person because they are someone higher and deserving of my respect. Note that humble speech is common in the workplace and toward older members of society. Let's talk about a couple of words that are actually humble speech that are used commonly. And the first one is 저, meaning I or me. This is actually a humble noun. When you're using 저, you are actually lowering yourself down to who you're speaking to. And the same thing applies to all versions of 저, including 제가, etc. This is why 저 is not used toward close friends, but instead 나 is used. 나 does not lower the speaker, and we'll learn more about using 나 in a later lesson. The plural version of 저 is 저희, meaning we or us, and this is also a humble noun. However, 저희 is typically only used when you're speaking extra politely, and it's not required to use 저희 in day-to-day speech towards strangers. You'll usually find this in more formal situations. Instead, you can just use the noun 우리, meaning we or us. There are also some words that aren't necessarily classified as honorific speech or humble speech, and you can use them when you just want to sound more polite or more formal. You can use them both about yourself or about other people. Here are just two. 말, meaning word or speech, can become 말씀. And 밥을 먹다, to eat a meal, could be used as 식사를 하다. Note that 식사를 하다 is not honorific speech or humble speech. It simply sounds a little more polite than saying 밥을 먹다. There is also an honorific version of the noun 밥, which is 진지. Note, however, that this is less common. And here are two more humble verbs that you should be aware of. 데리다, meaning to bring someone, can become 모시다. 도서관에 할아버지를 모시고 갔어요. I brought my grandfather to the library. And the verb 물어보다, meaning to ask, can become 여쭈다 or 여쭙다. 제가 하나만 여쭤보겠습니다. Let me ask you just one thing. So I have a few notes for this lesson, but before we go on to that, let's first do a listening practice. Here, a girl is calling her uncle about a birthday party. First, she says, 삼촌, uncle, 지난번에 레스토랑 예약해 주셔서 감사해요. Last time, thank you for reserving the restaurant. 삼촌이 말씀해 주신 대로 스테이크가 정말 맛있었어요. As you said, uncle, the steak was really delicious. 생신이신데 직접 만나 뵙고 선물 전해드리지 못해서 죄송해요. Although it's your birthday, I'm sorry that I couldn't see you personally and give you your present. So she's apologizing for not being able to give him a present in person. 숙모랑 좋은 시간 보내세요. 숙모 is a father's younger brother's wife, so an uncle's wife. So have a nice time with your wife.
삼촌, 지난번에 레스토랑 예약해 주셔서 감사해요. 삼촌이 말씀해 주신 대로 스테이크가 정말 맛있었어요. 생신이신데 직접 만나 뵙고 선물 전해드리지 못해서 죄송해요. 숙모랑 좋은 시간 보내세요.
Before we go on to some notes, take a second to pause the video here and try to answer these quick quiz questions on your own. You can resume the video when you're ready for the answers. Here are the answers. The first one is true. Both honorific speech and humble speech show extra respect to someone else who you're speaking about. The next question is false. You can use both turida and jushida when you give something to someone else who you want to show more respect toward. You could use turida in this situation, but not jushida. And finally, honorific speech shows respect by elevating the other person And humble speech shows extra respect by lowering the speaker. For some notes, the verb turida can also replace 주다 in the 주다 grammar form. For example, 해줄게요 could become 해드릴게요. However, preda cannot be used to replace the verb 보다 in the 보다 grammar form. For example, 해볼게요 could not become 해볼게요. So in this lesson, we covered humble speech. In the next lesson, we're going to start talking about casual speech. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next lesson. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!